All right, welcome back. In the previous video, you learned a little bit about Composer, which might have been brand new to you, and then you learned how to create your first Laravel 5 project, and we concluded the video by booting up a server on port 8888, and we set the document root to the public directory. And with that alone, we have a fresh install of Laravel 5. However, I did note one thing. What if you went through this process with me, but you were met with some kind of failure, like the mcrypt extension not being installed? Well, if you're on Windows or Mac, that actually is a bit of a pain. What are you supposed to do in those situations? And luckily, these days, it's true. There are all-in-one type tools, like MAMP or WAMP, that you can research. And while they remove a little bit of the configuration from your hands, they also give you something that will work in most situations. So especially if you're new to this stuff, that would be my first suggestion. Just pull in MAMP or WAMP and be done with it. You can learn about things like virtual machines once you get a little bit further down the road. However, what if either one, you're still having problems after doing that, or two, you're a bit more seasoned as a developer and you would prefer to use something like Vagrant in a virtual machine? Well, that's awesome. It allows you to separate your entire development environment from your actual machine that you do your day-to-day work on, which is really convenient. For example, when you update to the latest Mac OS, well, you don't have to worry about your development environment being completely broken. Or it also has benefits such as giving you an easy way to ensure that every person on your development team is using an identical environment. If you don't use something like Vagrant or a virtual machine or something saved like that, that actually can introduce some tricky problems. So having said all of that, in this video, we're going to research Laravel Homestead, which you can think of as a little wrapper to make the process of working with Vagrant and virtual machines that much easier for us. Just remember, if you're brand new to all this stuff and you just want to learn how to build your first website, well, if the very first video in this series worked without a hitch, it's okay if you want to skip this one. Don't let it overwhelm you. All right, let's get started. As you'll find, Homestead actually isn't that difficult as long as you have a basic understanding of the command line and such. Okay, so if we switch over to Laravel's documentation, of course, really anything you want to learn will be documented very well here. So hopefully, between the Laravel docs and Laracast, you should just have a massive education available to you. However, if you go through the documentation and you go through this video and you're still a little confused, really quickly, I've actually covered Homestead a couple times. So if you want, go through the Say Hello to Laravel Homestead 2 video, and maybe that will clarify a few things. All right, so let's see what our first step is. Well, we can see that Homestead is going to give us a virtual machine that has all of these various things out of the box. So you'll have the latest version of PHP, and of course MySQL and Postgres, and even things like Node so that you can run Gulp or Bower if you wish. So really, for modern PHP development, pretty much anything you would need access to will probably come out of the box, which is really helpful. That means you don't have to install all of this stuff on your own. Okay, so the first step is we need to pull in VirtualBox as well as Vagrant. Now this is really easy. Both of them are free, so just visit the website, find the necessary binary for your OS. In this case, I'm on a Mac. Download it, install it. It won't take very long at all. Next, you're going to do the exact same thing with Vagrant. And again, remember Vagrant makes the process of quickly booting up a development environment or even shutting it down as easy as possible. So it takes a lot of the legwork out of the process. But that still doesn't change the fact that after installing all of this, it's still a little confusing and overwhelming. And that's why we have Homestead, which makes it simple for all of us. You don't have to be a server admin wizard in order to figure some of this stuff out if you're just trying to build a website. Okay, so download this, and once again, it's very easy, a few clicks, and you're good to go. Now, once you do that, we need to add Laravel's Homestead Vagrant box. This is really easy. Once you install Vagrant, you'll have access to this new Vagrant executable. Let me show you. If I run Vagrant, there we go. So let's go ahead and add our box, and that'll take just a few minutes to install. Now, while we are pulling that in, let's go ahead and move on to the next step. We now need to install Laravel Homestead through Composer, and this will give us access to the Homestead executable, which gives us a lot of goodies that I will show you. So switch back, and once that's done, you'll paste that in. Now, Composer Global, you've seen Composer require to install a project-specific dependency, and as you can imagine, when you do Composer Global, it will store it likely somewhere in your home directory so that you can reference it anywhere on your system. So go ahead and run that. Finally, once you do all of this stuff, you should now have access to a Homestead executable, and we do. Now, one quick note on this. If you followed all of the steps, but you still run Homestead and you don't get anything, be sure to refer to the documentation. You want to make sure that this directory is part of your path. And to do that, you'll just open one of your various start files, like bashrc, or if you're using Z shell, you can open those. These will all be within your home directory if you're on a Mac. So once you do that, you would just do something like export path equals, and you'll paste in that path, and then append whatever else is included in your path. And that's it. Once you save the file and open a new terminal tab, you should have access to Homestead. Now we can run Homestead init to create our global configuration file that we can use. And this allows us to, well, let me show you actually. Let's edit the one on my demo machine. Homestead edit. And this might look a little confusing at first, but actually it's very, very simple to understand. Now, just before I move on, don't forget, I ran Homestead edit, which opened this file for me. Now, right up here at the top, you'll see that we need to reference our SSH keys. Now again, I'm going to assume that you understand what this is, but if you don't, it'll just take a little bit of research for you to understand it. Think of it as an identifier for your machine. If I switch back to Chrome, it'll show you exactly how to do that. So probably if you've ever used GitHub before, as an example, you already have this. But if not, you can just paste this into your terminal, run it, and that'll set everything up for you. Now, once you've created one of these keys, you just need to specify the path within your homestead.yaml file. And you'll see out of the box, it's going to assume a sensible default. This is very likely where yours is stored, so you may not need to edit that at all. Next, we can map any kind of folder on our guest machine, our main machine, to a folder on the VM. So in this case, notice that I'm just moving my entire code directory. I'm making that available on the VM at home vagrant code. Now, /code right here, this is where I store all general web projects. For example, the Laracast codebase is stored here. Any kind of demo applications are stored here. Side projects, also stored within that directory. So, in this particular scenario, you don't have to do it this way, but for this scenario, any of those will be available on my VM. Next, we have this site section. This is where we can very easily map domains. So notice I just have one, laracast.dev, once again for the Laracast codebase, and I'm setting the document root for that to the cast folder for Laracast and its public directory. Now, a quick note on that. This will do everything necessary for your VM, but you will still probably need to update your host file. So you'll grab your IP address, and we'll say sudo vi. On a Mac, it would be etc/hosts. And if I scroll down, I would just paste in the IP address as well as the custom domain I set up, foo.dev, or in the case of the example I showed you, that one right there. All right, once you're done with that, if you escape out, you should mostly be good to go. If I switch back to finish up very quickly, if there are any databases you want to quickly set up, you can add them here. In this case, we reference one called Homestead, which incidentally, Laravel will look for straight out of the box. So it's a nice convention to follow. Maybe just keep that as it is. And then finally, if you need any environment variables attached, when you boot this up, you can specify that here. All right, that's all there is to it. Specify a folder mapping, set up a site, and you're ready to go. If you switch back to the terminal, just run Homestead up. We're going to boot up our VM. Now, this may take 10, 15, 20 seconds or so, but we can see, sure enough, the machine has been booted and is ready to go. If we want to inspect it, I can run Homestead SSH. We are now SSHing into our VM. So if I list the files, we're good to go. Let's go into code, into that cast folder. And well, to start, let's just figure out what version of PHP we have. 5.6 in this case. We also have access to things like MySQL, or Node, or Gulp, or Grunt, or Power. All of that stuff is available straight out of the box. So let's see if it works. If I switch back to Chrome and we browse to Laracast.dev, everything is all set up. This is the development code for Laracasts. Now, if I switch back to the documentation, there's a few other things to know, but really the best way to learn this is to dig in yourself. So for example, how do you connect to a database once you've set up Homestead? Well, here we can see that we have a default username and password that we can reference. And then also things like when you're ready to add an additional site, how do you do that? Everything like that is available in the documentation. So your job, if you feel ready to use a VM in Homestead, is to figure out how to get a fresh install of Laravel up and running. Let me know how you did.